You're listening to Bedroom Beethovens, where notable music makers break down stories accompanied by songs and melodies documenting growth through their 10,000-hour journey. And me? Well, my name is Cello, your host.
I am a bedroom Beethoven.
Welcome to episode 133 of the podcast.
Of introducing one of my favorite artists. They call him Seven Davis Jr. You're like, what? Sammy Davis Jr.? No, not Sammy Davis Jr. Seven Davis Jr.
My guest this week is...
My name is Seven Davis Jr. I'm a singer, songwriter, producer, and I DJ here and there. I've collabed with Lion Babe. I did a remix for them. Fortet, Hot Chip, Honey Dijon. Various different genres.
Shout out to J-Rock's Adventures in Stereo for the dope intro, and I'm honored to sit down with a man who rarely does podcasts, and for good reason, because he's been through a lot, and it's not a story that's easy to tell. Seven Davis Jr. is a musical treasure, but he's also been a church boy, a homeless street kid, corporate suit addict, a singer, songwriter, producer, DJ, vocalist. We touch on the ups and downs of his career, depression, and most importantly, he's feeling renewed and passionate about the music. And we are being gifted, but only those that are open to accepting, the new album. Real quick, though, if you support the show, let's do it even bigger. Patreon.com/BedroomBeethovens is the easiest, quickest way to show your love, financially speaking, I suppose. But it's just $1 or $2, and in return, I keep the show ad-free. It makes me feel all warm and fuzzy, and I'll give you perks like early access to shows. And the main website, bedroombeethovens.com, is where you can find me on all social media platforms except for Facebook. Blech. And you can send me an email. You can say what's up. You can talk to me directly. If you need a shoulder to lean on, I'm here for you guys. I'm here for you. Also buy a shirt. But no, really, I'm here for you. Let's get things rolling. Episode 133 with Sev, the man of the hour. And I know you got your name Seven because of your birthday, but seven is a very significant number. Probably my favorite number as well. And there are, according to Gandhi, there are 7 pitfalls of life, and I want to read them to you, and you tell me if you're guilty of any of them. Does that sound okay? All right. So there's wealth without work. There's pleasure without conscience. There's knowledge without character. Commerce without morality. Science without humanity. Religion without sacrifice, and last, politics without principle.
Am I victim to any of those? No. I mean, I I got my things I mess up on, but like those things are, thank God. The first one was wealth without work. Yeah, nah, must be nice. Never. I've never had that problem. I've always had to work.
I would imagine like maybe a lot of those virtuals were gained by growing up in Houston. I mean, you're the son of a session musician, so does that mean that there were like good months and bad months? Maybe one year he worked a lot and another not so much. Maybe there were a lot of ebbs and flows.
I mean, not to put him on the spot, but the good and bad moments weren't necessarily. It's just from our relationship and his personality. But I actually grew up in like in between. Really, I grew up in East San Jose. And I spent time in Houston, so it's kind of back and forth. Him being a session musician was actually the coolest part of it.
Okay, well, it's really funny. You're talking to me at a time where last month I actually moved to Houston. I grew up in Central Texas, but I actually just moved to Houston last month. I'm in the 3rd Ward. I'm literally a block from Joel Osteen's church, which is funny because he's getting roasted right now for owning a Ferrari.
When I was there, I was really young, and I spent a lot of my teenage years in the Bay Area, California. but I was back and forth. And now in my adult life, I've been spending more time there. I'm actually going there next week. I mean, in my opinion, as someone who's lived in LA and Houston, and LA ain't no better, respectfully. I think in Houston, you just kind of have to find those pockets because the people that my family in Houston, I call them my family, but my associates in Houston are very creative. They do they're always doing something, art exhibits, parties. They have restaurants. They're not just musicians, but it's very much like a pocket. Like if you didn't know that was there, yeah, if you didn't know about it or where to go, you would probably think Houston was dry.
Oh, yeah. And I've never seen a mega church in my life. I bet you can probably see spiritual phoniness from a mile away. I know gospel music is probably a business just like anything else.
Oh, yeah, it is. I mean, I grew up in the church and I was in the gospel business, music industry, or I guess business before either one. That was actually where I was like trying to go first. Yeah, for a while I wanted to be like in the gospel industry. So I spent some time in there. But I mean, yeah, Houston's not dry. I mean, you got to remember, like Beyonce is from Houston. Like a lot of great people are from Houston. Lizzo.
That's true. Yeah. So whenever you see a musical artist like either Kanye or Mace or Hammer become a preacher or they do gospel music, do you feel like those are ever genuine transitions or it's just business decisions?
I really can't call it. I try not to judge. Like everybody's spiritual journey is different. I know me, like if somebody was looking from the outside, I have my moments. They might think that I'm not like spiritual at all. I have been accused of not being spiritual at all, but I'm actually a very spiritual person. But with spirituality, sometimes you go through your F shit. Can I curse?
Oh yeah, anything you want to say.
I'm already cursing. Your fuck shit. Sometimes you go through your fuck shit. But I actually did sing with Hammer in his choir for a brief part of his gospel. Well, he's still doing gospel, but in the beginning, I was actually a member of his choir briefly. He used to have a choir called SJCC, San Jose Community Choir, that backed him. So I actually toured with Hammer a little bit. I think I went on 1 or 2 tours. I was like 14, 15. I had to do homework in the hotel. He's actually really about it. I know I can say that he was about it when he first started. And I was a fan of Hammer before the gospel stuff, so it was cool to see.
Yeah, I didn't know that the MC and MC Hammer stood for Man of Christ. I don't know if he changed that later.
I didn't know that. No, I didn't know that either.
So, I mean, as you grew up and moved around, you experienced, different religions as you did different types of music. For example, you started off with your gospel friends and then jazz and then hip hop. And I imagine you're doing this with the intent of absorbing the opinions of other people, like getting their different outlooks and just learning. So, did your outlook on religion at all change by absorbing the POV of other people that you were hanging out with, or like what was the intention?
Yeah, the way I learn is I just I soak up the experience and I vibe. So I was really just vibing. But for a while, my religion from those experiences, that's when I learned that I wasn't necessarily religious. I was more spiritual. I did learn that. I learned the difference from those experiences.
Yeah, I read that really crazy that there can be some violence in gospel music too, like people waving guns around. I read that story that you told, and your lives can be threatened. And I was wondering, like, man, are people like Yolanda Adams and Kirk Franklin, do they deal with that stuff behind the scenes, or do they just kind of? Yeah.
Man, I can't even speak on it. I won't even speak on it, bro. Yeah. I don't know, but it ain't no different. From my experience, it ain't no different.
So you're a teenager. I also read that you started experimenting with drugs a little bit. When I use the word experimenting, I don't think it's in the sense of trying any drug you get your hands on, but more about expanding your musical boundaries, and it kind of opened you up to learning about yourself, right?
Really, no. I wish it sounds cool, but maybe experimenting isn't the right word. I just kind of I didn't really have an easy upbringing, so I just started doing whatever. It was really kind of escapism that got out of hand. But one of the bonuses of it was it did kind of take me into this like psychedelic. It did kind of benefit me creatively. But when I first kind of started dabbling, I was really just kind of like, whatever. Life is on some BS right now, so let me get on some BS as well. I had also kind of had this period of FOMO because up until then I was a church boy. I was in church all the time. I'm laughing at how I used to be, but I barely cursed. I remember one of my friends in high school like smoked weed, and I think I might have went into some like, "You're gonna go to hell." Like, so looking back, I'm like, that's so embarrassing. But before that, I kind of like missed out on life. All my friends were like, wilding out as you do at a certain age, and I didn't. So me ending up messing around with drugs was just kind of like, you know what? I spent all this time trying to be like a good Christian, and it really hasn't got me nowhere. So let me go ahead and just wild out too. One of the unexpected advantages of that was like, yeah, it had me look at music differently, and it doesn't happen for everybody. Like some people do drugs and they just end up on drugs, but that actually was, it was good for me as far as like creatively. It kind of helped me step out of the box.
Well, earlier this month, you played with David Harness, and you knew him or you guys knew each other since you were, in the teenage years. Was he around for any of those experiences you just talked about?
He was there during my my ecstasy phase. When I first kind of got into, I didn't used to like dance music or house music. I used to only like, R&B, top 40, gospel, hip hop, you know what I'm saying? Underground hip hop. And I really knew nothing about dance music aside from like Cece Peniston, which I did like her, you know what I'm saying? And in the Bay Area, they had a bunch of, I think it's called freestyle. They had a bunch of freestyle artists, which isn't house music or dance music, but it's similar. So anyways, when I started getting into dance music, house music in San Francisco, I was also like in heavy ecstasy phase, and I would go out to parties and kind of like, I don't know if I'm incriminating myself, but I would like, me and my homies would sell E, and you know what I'm saying, and just wild out. And I did meet David Harness. He met me like at a really, really raw phase, because I feel like I go through phases, and there's different variants of me throughout time. And he met me at a really, really raw time. I think I would go up to him and tell him like, yeah, I want to sing over some house tracks, and he would just be really kind and be like, okay, we'll do it. And he never actually ended up doing it, but he was always kind. Not everybody. You tell people you want to do music and you're like a teenager, and not everybody is kind, especially if they're already established. So he was always like kind, non-judgmental, whether I was drunk, high, or whatever. He was always super sweet. So we've like maintained that friendship now that I'm a grown man, and we actually played together. Yeah, we played in Oakland. It was him and this guy named Patrick Wilson, who is also like, as far as in my life, I consider like a legend, because when I first got into dance, house music, it was very much black. So I would go see David Harness. I would go see Patrick Wilson. And Patrick Wilson, he has, or I don't remember if he still has dreads, but he has dreads, and he would play just like really, really soulful music. It almost sounded like sped up like R&B, which I'd never heard before. And then he would like, dance, which it looked like capoeira and all this kind of like African stuff. So anyways, I said that to say this, like I finally got to play with these two dudes that I used to go support and talk to when I was a teenager. So it was very much like full circle.
I mean, the one genre I didn't hear is what you were put in a position to be like the next R&B star. Like, how did that happen?
I always wanted to get into music, and but whatever, I used to, like most teenagers do, I listened to Top 40, and I watched 106 in Park, and I watched all the things, MTV. So I didn't know nothing else existed, to be honest with you. So I was like, yeah, let's go for it. So I had some family friends that were in the business. They were in the mainstream. So yeah, I ended up, going to lessons, and I always took music lessons, but like I went to like media training lessons and I don't know, all this stuff. And I started learning about like contracts and just like meeting different people that they knew. I think I auditioned for the Mickey Mouse Club, the one that had like Justin Timberlake and Christina and all them fools. And I made it to like the last round in San Francisco. I had all these like situations, but I mean, like for example, the Mickey Mouse thing, I made it to the last round, and then I sang, I think Bobby Brown, "Humping Around," and they said I was too like mature. And the only reason I sang that is because like I had a crush on the dancer in the video, this girl Lily, who I ended up meeting later in life. So, anyways, like there was always situations like that, like oh, there's something there, but he's too mature, or he's not masculine enough. Because I had like a really really high voice. I sang soprano in the choir for the longest time. Or he's straight up ugly, or he doesn't have the look. This and that. Like I just had all these like A&Rs, and people just shut it down. And then, as time progressed, I found out that there's like other things, there's other, but I didn't know that at the time. So I first went for mainstream.
So it seems like they kind of put you through the ringer, but like later on in life, for example, because you mentioned contracts, you got a 3-album record deal from a label, which on paper sounds great, but you didn't take it. What was bad about it? Is there like no rights to your music? You couldn't make the kind of music you wanted to, something along those lines?
They put me the way it was with a British label, and I love my British folks, but they're they can be trife just like Americans can. And so they kind of had me in this situation where, when you're about to sign, it felt good. It felt like the right thing to do. They felt supportive. But then once we got in a deal, from my perspective, it felt like they wanted me to make more of a British sounding album. And just where I was in my life, I was an American who had never been overseas. For the most part, up until then, I was kind of unknown, unacknowledged. So I had all this like, there's just so much happening at once, right? Like, so anyways, I'm over there thinking like, okay, yeah, I'm on a British label and I'm living in the UK, but I'm still from San Jose in Texas in America. So I wanted to make more of a blend between American and UK sounds, because one thing about me is I'm influenced by my surroundings. So I had all these new kind of European influences going on. So anyways, I was trying to do that, and they were trying to go for more, I guess, like, had I delivered an album with all dance music on it, I think they would have been fine. But just where I was at, I wanted to represent everything. So the first album was kind of like a sampler. I wanted to kind of go everywhere. I think I did like 2 or 3, maybe 3 or 4 dance tracks, a couple down tempo, and then like 2 or 3 really, really experimental tracks. And anyways, like they kind of supported, kind of didn't. So 3 albums, right? So we went through the first phase, and it was actually well received. But then I get hit up kind of towards the end from, I forget who it was, but basically they were like, it's not selling enough. But the way they said it just made me feel like somebody's like prostitute or something. And then I was growing into myself more, and I knew that my sound was definitely going to go more black, more American. And I was just thinking, and I was like, you know what? They're not going to be able to go where I'm trying to go next. So I just, well, really what it was, and this might sound crazy, but I'm a Prince fan, and I'm just a fan of a lot of like artists, and especially their interviews. I learn a lot from what other artists say. So I was cruising through YouTube, which I normally do, just watching and listening to interviews, and I came across the interview from Prince where he was like, if you don't own your masters or something, they'll own you. And even though like I didn't really have a problem with the masters part, because I knew going into a record deal, like, yeah, this is what happens, right? I'm making this. When I made that album that I made with the record label we're talking about, I knew that this was like a joint thing. This is not like my baby that I like. This is like making something for both of us. So I wasn't mad about that, but something about what he said like clicked. And so I thought about it, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna bounce. I'm gonna head out, because I was like, I wanted to get more into I wanted to get back to my American side, my ethnic side. And I actually left I left the record label, left publishing. I fired my whole team. I moved back to America and just like reconnected, started over.
Okay, well, I think you say that you make music based on your surroundings, but I think the other side of the coin is you purposely try to make future music. So how does that work? How do you see where the hockey puck is going to be and know what music sounds like 5-10 years in the future and then try to match it?
I don't really. I just vibe. I think in that period we're talking about, like when I was signed and I guess when I debuted, I was definitely on that, like, I'm going to make something that sounds futuristic, and then I would just make something that I thought would be futuristic sounding. And thank God, like, that was the vibe. People still listen to it today, you know, and it's still relevant today. And I guess in places where I'm relevant these days, I'm actually really just kind of, I'm just making like, well, actually, so when I moved back home, when I was in Europe, I was surrounded more around European sounds. Does that make sense? You know, I was in London, I was in Berlin, so that's more techno. It's more, I had all those sounds going. When I came home, it was like I was reintroduced to American music. I started listening to oldies. I started spending a lot of time with this DJ producer named J Rock. I don't know if you know him. I loved disco before, but J Rock actually put me on to like so much disco, and then he makes these great edits. And then just kind of like the time we spent together and like the music we shared, and he kind of like the time with him, it kind of helped me step my game up as far as like being a DJ and all this stuff. And he put me on the disco, and so now my sound is a little bit retro. You know, before I was thinking like, let me make something that's futuristic, and nowadays, especially with the new album and the new music, it's more like, let me pay homage to like the past.
I also know that Eric Coleman was he sparked a renewed interest in your work as well. And for anyone who doesn't know who he is, for my money, I think he took the most iconic photo in hip hop history, which is the Mad Villainy photo. But what you were talking about being surrounded in like new environments and how it influences your music. Before Dilla died, his wish was to go to Brazil, and Eric Coleman took him there with Madlib. Dilla got sick there and had to return to the U.S. on doctor's orders. But Madlib's 420 Chalice All Stars would never have happened if it wasn't for Eric. And I'm blown away by the influence of a photographer had on the industry back then. You know, and then I hear the story of him being responsible for connecting you and Katma.
Yeah, no, I mean,
Kuma.
Eric is he is more than just a photographer. He is a very, 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 very interesting person. These people are legends, and to me, they're like brothers. They're like older brothers in every sense. We talk sometimes, we argue, not necessarily with Coleman, but I feel very blessed to know these people. Yeah, Coleman is a magical, very, very talented person. So is Koopma, so is J Rock. A lot of people don't know that. We have like I have relationships with these people because they don't see us really that much together. But they are people that I consider, you know, older brothers, and they've played a very, very, very important role in my life, in my career and stuff like that.
At the time, though, like with all the past trauma you went through, were you hesitant about Kutma? Like, oh, he just wants to hear my music so he can like laugh in my face type of thing, or you knew he wasn't about that bullshit? Like, he really wants to put me on, and this is the start of something real.
I'm always ready for the bullshit to go down, and I think that's just because of what I had to go through growing up. I'm always like, okay, this is cool, but you know, I'm always like waiting for the bullshit to come in. But with Kutma, I was more accepting of him because when I lived in LA and when I was with Coleman and J Rock, and I was also spending a lot of time with Shafiq Hussein when he was forming his collective, the Dove Society, and recording his album, The Loop. So all these things were going on at the same time, and I didn't know Koopman at the time, but I think Koopman had gotten deported, and there was a big campaign to help him out. So when I finally did meet Koopman, I felt like I knew him already, and then we had such great conversations. Honestly, it took me. It was a trip. I was when I moved to London, he was there. Like, so he basically got deported, and he was separated from everyone. And then I didn't know him when he got deported, but the next thing I know, he was like, we were spending like all time together in London. Making beats, just like vibing, doing shows. So he actually became a really, really close friend. And sorry, I forget where I was going with that, but yeah, Koopman had this kind of buffer, like, because he knew so many people knew him and spoke of him. So when I met him in London, I was like, yeah, you're family. We have so many mutual friends. Plus, I met him through Coleman. So we just linked up out there.
Yeah, it's interesting to note that his deportation happened because someone forgot to file the paperwork when he immigrated from the UK. So ICE raided his home, interrogated him, and then left him in a detention center in New Mexico for like 2 months until they shipped him back. So he was juggling that with, your introduction to him and starting the new music and all that and the compilations. So that was a very tumultuous time.
It was, and it was crazy for me to be like, wow, and I am with you now after all this. And I was like, man, I hope that I don't know, like, we fell out for a little bit, me and Kuma, but brothers, you fall out sometimes, at least with me. Like, I don't fight with everybody that I'm close with, but my family, they were, I had to fight them coming up. So part of me, I guess, with some personalities, if I care about you, I'm going to fight with you. So me and Koopman fell out, but we're good now. But before that, I was just kind of like, man, well, fucking out of everybody in LA, my ass is here with you. So I'm going to be the bro you need, because he was kind of out there by himself.
Was some of that the contributing factor to feeling depressed in 2016? Because you didn't really release much music from that. Like, was it music related? Was it industry related? Was it family related, or just something else?
A little bit of everything, but before all that happened, I was actually actively, taking care of my depression and addressing the issues, whatever they were. And the shit happened so fast to where it definitely like put a pause on things. Like 2011, 2012, next thing I know, I'm like traveling. I'm all around the world. I'm in different countries. And from somebody who grew up in the hood in San Jose and in Houston, I was just kind of like, well, I was like, what the fuck? Like, so I pushed all that other stuff to the background. And then, 2012 to 2016, that's a long time to be touring and just kind of going. So I was like, you need to chill out and go address some things and just kind of regroup. And that's what made me address the depression. But what kind of pushed it back into gear was processing everything. There was a little bit of a feeling like a failure from not being able to complete. It's not that I wasn't able to complete the 3-album deal, but there was a little bit of that, like, failure, even though I knew I was doing the right thing for myself. There was a lot of like, oh, you're a failure though. When you make a move like that, there's a lot of people that are going to tell you you're a failure as well. And they did, your career's over, you fucked up. Like, it was just really, really, I got to see the nastiest sides of people I knew, people I didn't know. Like, it was almost demonic, is the best word to describe it. So that definitely like kind of made me attack myself for a while. So anyway, I needed to go through all that to sort it out. So I kind of like let that happen, and I was depressed. I got into some fuck shit here or there. I acted out. I was kind of a mess for a few years, but I still recorded music. That's never like the problem. And then after a while, I was just kind of like, all right, this shit is getting old. This ain't you. So let's really like look at what this is. And one by one, I just started addressing the issues I was having and got my health back and got my peace back. And then I was like, it's time to just come back and make music as well. Like, start putting out more music. Because it's not like I couldn't put out music. It's just that, I had all this other shit just kind of preoccupying my time. So now that stuff is gone, like I'm still living, I'm still learning, I still got things I'm working on, but at least I'm not way down.
Yeah, I'm glad you're not way down too. And I read though, because maybe people don't realize this, but when you went through that healing process and that soul searching, it actually led to a relapse. How does something so good can lead to a relapse? How did that happen?
I mean, it's me, my fault. It's me. Like, there's definitely like different levels of myself, right? Like, and my surroundings. Like, I'm very much influenced by my surroundings, and if I'm in like a really, really dark, negative place, after a while, I'm gonna start getting dark and negative too. I wasn't really watching my surroundings. I ended up in this really, really dark place, not just like personally, but who I was around and what I let kind of seep into my hemisphere. And I was like, fuck it, let's go ahead and do the fuck shit. uh, and I let myself kind of relapse. But the thing about myself is like I might drift off into the dark end for a while, but I know that it's temporary. But I gotta let myself do it in order to get out of it.
It's been documented that you kind of love solitude. It's like you can lock yourself in a studio for weeks at a time. That's like your preferred method. But what about the pandemic turned that trait into a negative aspect?
Nothing. It actually benefited me. Everybody was like struggling with being in the house and like being with themselves, and I was like, this is what I do all day, baby. So during the pandemic, it made me look at it like, yo, like there's nothing wrong with you actually. Like I have homies that say, if I were in prison and they threw me in the solitary confinement chamber, I'd be thriving. And it's kind of the truth. Like, I don't know. The pandemic actually made me see that in a different light. Because before I thought like, man, you're antisocial, you're weird. I was actually called weird. I've been called weird for that. But now after seeing so many people struggle with just like being with themselves, I'm actually glad I have that trait. But the pandemic has actually made me more social. I mean, that's why I'm even talking to you. I really don't like do podcasts and stuff like that. But the pandemic made me be like, yo, you need to have conversations, you need to interact.
How is it so far? Is it worth your time so far?
No, it's good, man. I hope I'm not talking
too
much.
Hey, talking too much is the name of the game for a podcast. But the pandemic, though, it's justified. When you hear people say it's a hoax or anti-mask or my rights, my freedoms, you're scoffing because a flu doesn't put you on the couch for 3 months. This shit's real.
Yeah, it is. It is real. I had it for exactly 3 months, and it was brutal. But I had it so early. It was right just before it kind of was on the news and everything. And that was the last time I've been sick to this day. I found out later that I had it because I was like, let me go ahead and, I had it in LA, and then I moved to Seattle, and I was just kind of up there. And at some point later in the year, it became kind of, the tests were readily available. So I went and got both the tests. I got the antibodies and I got COVID. I was negative on COVID, but I was positive on antibodies, and I haven't been sick since I was sick for that 3 months. So I had it. I know it was real, but during the whole pandemic, when everybody was like kind of afraid and this and that, I had already had it. So I was really just chilling. The pandemic didn't hit me hard. No disrespect to anyone that was affected by it, but I was already going through it before the pandemic. So the pandemic kind of was like when things started getting better for me.
Yeah, and then kind of the rebuilding process starts too. The 7 Davis Jr. 2.0. You're working out, you're eating right, you're resting, you're recovering, you're recording music, and I think that kind of contributes to kind of coming out on the other side. What I was interested in as a person like you, as interesting as you are, one of the steps that you took to self-recovering was studying. What did you study? What did you read? What did you learn that contributed to your better self?
Well, thank you. I'm glad you think I'm interesting. I wish more people in my life thought that. Just everything, man. I watch tons of documentaries. Like I really, really I don't know. These days, it seems like a lot of people just want to come up, right, or make music, or they just want fame. I really do like music. You know what I'm saying? So I watch documentaries on like my favorite artists, Sammy Davis Jr., Franks, anybody really. If there's a documentary on a musician, I'll watch it. Um, and I just kind of study what they went through, study how their life started, how their life ended, looked at the similarities. I listen to all kind of music, even music I don't necessarily care for. I would listen to it and try and understand or listen to the things that I do like. I did a lot of studying of disco and soul and music before my time, like before I was born, and really listening to like, because a lot of times they had session musicians. They didn't have like digital machines in some cases. So I would just kind of listen and be like, wow, this is incredible. And hear how like the bass is doing one thing with one rhythm and the guitar is doing another thing. And they all have their own movement and vibe because a lot of the times it was a whole other person playing those things. And I studied how like, they might put one drum sound over here and they might you do this. So I studied basically like a lot of older techniques and stuff and started putting it into the new music I was making because I recorded the meat of my new album during lockdown and the vocals and all that during lockdown. And while I was recording it, I was also doing that studying. So on this new album that I'm finishing, just putting like, dotting my I's, crossing my T's on, I've incorporated those things that I learned into the new album. And it's kind of helped. It's definitely helped me. I feel like step my game up and be able to continue my journey because I don't know. For me, as an artist, I know some artists they kind of get stuck. Like, oh, this is the sound I make, and I'm gonna make this type of sound forever. But I didn't want that. I always want to keep getting better. So yeah, I studied. I had to retrain my vocals, man, because COVID hit me. I don't have any like damaging effects from it, but when I had it, man, it really hit me. It was hard to breathe. I've never had shortness of breath problems, so I had to like learn how to do breathing control for singing again. So I basically relearned my vocal techniques and stuff like that during COVID from like, taking lessons online, practicing, re-going over things that I learned growing up in the church, you know. The funny thing though is when I had COVID, like I cleared out my lungs, like I coughed up phlegm, like it's almost like I cleared out everything from my system and I came out of it with a stronger falsetto. So I had to, I, I started learning how to like control my falsetto because now I had more range, if that sounds weird. So I started practicing using the falsetto, which I'm using on this next album more than I have in the past.
Interesting, yeah. Because I also read you did a little bit of ghost production, and for me it was because you mentioned that doc how sometimes they weren't even in charge of their beats, and it's like if you make a beat and you release it, an executive could laugh in your face, but if you give it to another artist and they make it a hit, it seems undeserving and kind of disrespectful in a way, even though it pays the bills.
Yeah, I mean, my whole thing with ghostwriting is I got into it coming up. Well, when I was trying to go for mainstream, and fools would basically be like, "Nah, you're weird. Nah, you're gay." Essentially, is what they were saying. Whatever they came up with, they would be like, "Well, we like what you can do. Why don't you sit in with this person and write or produce or this and that?" So I did a few. That's how the ghostwriting came about. Where it was essentially from being shut down, people are like, "Oh, but we like what you can do. So why don't you work on that?" And then I kept it going. When I got into like underground hip hop and in the Bay Area, I didn't really. I thought I had stopped ghostwriting when I stopped doing mainstream stuff, but I kind of kept doing it without knowledge to myself because I would still kind of do stuff on the side the mainstream industry really like kicked my self-esteem in the nuts. So I I was recovering from it, but still doing music and still working on people's projects. But I basically did a lot of like ghost writing for free at some point. And then I realized like, oh, I actually like this. This is cool. You know, when people will take your ideas seriously. You know. So I kept doing it. I still do it every once in a while. But these days, I just like I sell it. I sell it off.
Oh, okay. Well, I mean, and I think that's what makes me excited about this album, because it seems like it's confessional. It's everything that we kind of talked about of the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 years is poured into this album. It's authentic. It's you. And you just signed a distribution deal with your record label, Secret Angels. And I don't know, maybe I'm off base, but that's kind of what I'm getting with this album, is it's unapologetically you. And you know, the floor is yours. If there's anything else that we need to talk about it, by the time this episode comes out, the Figure It Out single is going to be out, so people are going to be enjoying that. But the floor is yours. Anything you want to say about it?
No, you're on point. You're on point. It's all those things, but in the sound and in the quality, but the subject matter, it's not. If you didn't know all this about me, you would think that the new album is just like a feel good vibe record. Really, like, it's all those things, but it's really me. Like, all right, I've been depressed. I've been through all this shit, blah blah blah. Now I want to have fun. That's the new record. Like, now I'm just trying to have some good times. Like, I'm damn near. I'm 40 years old now. I've been through all this stuff. I'm tired of being depressed, angry, sad, whoop. Like, now I just want to have a good time.
I'm so glad that I'm able to connect with you at that point in your life. Like, that's awesome to hear. And I want to thank you for your honesty, your time, sharing your wisdom with me. It's been a wonderful podcast experience for me, and truly, I want to thank you. And I'm going to continue to be a fan on the sideline as you release more music into this year and the next.
All right, man. Thank you. It was good talking to you.